December 1941. The cold waters of the English Channel churned with danger. Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany, its navy stretched thin defending vital shipping lanes. In a nondescript building in the seaside town of Portsmouth, a small group of men gathered around what appeared to be a simple canoe. But this was no ordinary watercraft. Major Hugh Reeves of the Combined Operations Development Center watched intently as the young engineer finished his explanation. "So you see, sir, she can submerge to avoid detection with only the operator's head above water, breathing through a simple snorkel. We call her Sleeping Beauty." This unassuming craft would become one of Britain's most secretive weapons of World War II, a motorized submersible canoe designed for clandestine operations behind enemy lines. In the darkest hours of the war, when conventional military might seemed insufficient, Britain turned to unconventional solutions. The Sleeping Beauty represented the intersection of desperation, innovation, and courage, a vessel so secretive that even today, many military historians remain unaware of its existence. The story begins not with military engineers, but with a maverick inventor, Major Hugh Quentin Allen Reeves, a former World War I Royal Engineers officer, had been recruited to the Inter-Services Research Bureau, ISRB, better known by its cover name, Station 9. Located at the Frythe, a secluded Victorian hotel near Welwyn Garden City, Station 9 operated under the umbrella of the Special Operations Executive, SOE, Churchill's secret army tasked with sabotage and subversion in occupied Europe. Reeves possessed the rare combination of practical engineering knowledge and creative vision necessary for developing specialized equipment. By late 1941, the need for covert attack craft had become urgent. German U-boats were decimating Allied shipping in the Battle of the Atlantic, while heavily defended Axis harbors throughout Europe sheltered warships that threatened Britain's survival. Conventional naval attacks on these harbors often proved costly and ineffective. The Admiralty needed a way to deliver explosive charges directly to enemy ships, undetected by watchful sentries and harbor defenses. The concept of human torpedoes wasn't entirely new. Italy's Regia Marina had already deployed manned torpedoes called maiali, pigs, with devastating effect against British warships in Alexandria and Gibraltar. But Reeves envisioned something different, smaller, simpler, and uniquely British in its approach. Instead of adapting existing torpedo designs, he started with the familiar canoe, a craft already used by British commandos for coastal reconnaissance. The challenge lay in making it submersible while maintaining its key advantages: silence, maneuverability, and simplicity. Working with a small team, including skilled craftsman Frederick Goatley, founder of Saunders Row, a boat-building company, and Captain Jack Howe, Reeves developed the initial prototypes in utmost secrecy. The design called for a fully enclosed canoe approximately 12 feet 8 inches long, constructed from a light wood frame covered with canvas and waterproofed. Unlike conventional submersibles with complex ballast systems, the Sleeping Beauty would achieve submersion through a brilliantly simple mechanism. The operator could adjust water intake valves to control buoyancy. Power came from a small electric motor connected to a propeller, allowing the craft to travel at around 4.5 knots on the surface and 2 knots submerged. The operator, typically a Royal Marine or Naval Commando, sat inside wearing a specialized rubber suit, with only his head above water. A simple snorkel allowed him to breathe while the craft moved in its semi-submerged, trim condition. The Sleeping Beauty carried no weapons itself. Its purpose was purely transportation, delivering a combat swimmer and their limpet mines to target ships under cover of darkness. With no metal components to trigger magnetic detection systems and a virtually silent motor, It represented a perfect insertion vehicle for the most dangerous naval missions of the war. By early 1942, the prototype was ready for testing in the controlled environment of Staines Reservoir near London. The initial trials revealed both promise and problems. The craft proved remarkably stable and quiet in the water, but controlling buoyancy required considerable skill. Too much water intake would send the canoe plunging below the surface, while too little left it exposed to enemy sight. Royal Marine volunteers spent weeks mastering the delicate balance required. Meanwhile, engineers worked to improve the waterproofing and enhance the electric motor's reliability. The first operational model, designated MKY, featured a maximum range of approximately 40 miles at surface speed, sufficient for most harbor penetration missions. When submerged with only the operator's head exposed, the trim position, that range decreased to about 20 miles. This limitation meant that larger vessels would typically need to transport the Sleeping Beauty close to the target area before launching it under cover of darkness. What made the Sleeping Beauty truly revolutionary was its psychological dimension. The operator experienced something few other military personnel ever would: a profound sensory isolation combined with extreme vulnerability. Traveling through cold waters at night, with limited visibility and hearing impaired by the water surrounding the craft, demanded extraordinary courage and mental fortitude. Royal Marine Lieutenant Jack Montague, one of the first operators trained, later described the experience. "You become part of the sea itself. In darkness, with only your face above water, enemy lookouts simply cannot distinguish you from the natural movement of waves. Your greatest enemies are cold and fear, both of which you must master completely." The training program established at Portsmouth selected candidates not only for physical stamina, but also for psychological resilience. Many washed out, unable to endure the claustrophobic conditions and the knowledge that discovery meant certain capture or death. By mid-1942, the first operational Sleeping Beauties were ready for deployment, coinciding with the formation of specialized units to operate them. The most notable was the Combined Operations Pilotage Parties, COOP, established under the command of Lieutenant Commander Nigel Clogstone Wilmot. COP teams would use the submersible canoes for reconnaissance of potential landing beaches ahead of amphibious operations. Simultaneously, the Small Operations Group within the Royal Marines began training specifically for harbor penetration missions. The craft received its whimsical code name Sleeping Beauty, not just from its ability to lie dormant in the water with minimal exposure, but from the operational security surrounding it. Knowledge of its existence was compartmentalized to such a degree that even high-ranking naval officers remained unaware of the program. This secrecy has contributed to its relative obscurity in military history, especially compared to other special maritime craft like the X-craft midget submarines. The first combat deployment came in October 1942, when 2 Sleeping Beauties were used to reconnoiter beaches in North Africa ahead of Operation Torch, the Allied invasion. Launched from submarines offshore, COP operators navigated to their assigned beaches, took detailed notes on sand composition, obstacles, and defenses, then returned with critical intelligence that shaped the landing plans. The mission's success validated the concept, though the freezing water conditions had severely tested the operator's endurance. By early 1943, a modified Mk II version addressed some of the initial design limitations. The new model featured improved waterproofing, a more reliable electric motor, and most importantly, better thermal protection for the operator. The original design had relied on heavy rubber suits that proved inadequate against prolonged cold water exposure. The Mk II incorporated an early version of what would eventually evolve into modern diving suits, with improved insulation that extended potential operation time from 2 hours to nearly 4. in moderate water temperatures. The Sleeping Beauty faced its greatest test in the Mediterranean theater, where Italian and German naval bases presented high-value targets for Allied sabotage operations. In July 1943, as part of preparations for the Sicily landings, Royal Marine operators deployed from submarines to examine coastal defenses near Syracuse. Moving silently through waters patrolled by enemy boats, they collected crucial intelligence on underwater obstacles, defensive positions, and beach gradients. The information directly contributed to the successful landings that began the Italian campaign. More aggressive applications followed. In September 1943, a daring operation targeted German vessels in the harbor at La Spezia on Italy's northwestern coast. Two Sleeping Beauties, carried to the vicinity by the submarine HMS Safari, penetrated the harbor defenses under cover of darkness. Their operators placed limpet mines on the hulls of two supply vessels before withdrawing safely. The subsequent explosion sank both targets and created substantial confusion among German forces, who could not determine how the attackers had evaded their extensive harbor defenses. The operational challenges were immense. Beyond the physical demands, Sleeping Beauty missions required meticulous planning. Tidal patterns, currents, moonlight conditions, and enemy patrol schedules all needed careful consideration. Launch windows were often extremely narrow, with operators having precise timelines to reach their targets and withdraw before daylight exposed them. The craft itself, despite its ingenious design, remained vulnerable to numerous hazards. Unexpected water currents could push it off course, while mechanical failures left the operator with only manual paddling as recourse. A near impossible task while maintaining the semi-submerged position. By mid-1944, approximately 20 Sleeping Beauties had been manufactured at facilities in Portsmouth and Southampton. Each craft cost roughly $300 to produce, approximately 15,000 tons or 20,000 tons in today's currency. A fraction of the cost of a conventional submarine or even the X-craft midget submarines that served similar roles. As Allied forces gained momentum against Germany, the Sleeping Beauty found new applications. During preparations for the D-Day landings, COP teams used the submersible canoes to conduct detailed surveys of the Normandy beaches, operating from small fishing vessels in the channel. The intelligence gathered proved invaluable, identifying underwater obstacles and German defensive positions that might have otherwise caused catastrophic casualties during the landings. Perhaps the most audacious deployment came in March 1945, during Operation Rimau, a long-range attack against Japanese shipping in Singapore Harbor. Australian and British Special Forces operators transported several Sleeping Beauties aboard a captured Japanese fishing vessel, planning to launch them for the final approach. Although the operation ultimately ended in tragedy, with all participants either killed in action or captured and executed, it demonstrated the strategic value placed on these small craft, even in distant Pacific theater operations. The war's end in 1945 didn't immediately terminate the Sleeping Beauty program. The Cold War's emerging realities suggested continued value for clandestine naval operations. Between 1946 and 1952, a final version, the Mk II, introduced further refinements, including a more powerful motor and improved navigation equipment. The Royal Marines maintained a small fleet of these craft through the 1950s, primarily for training special forces in maritime infiltration techniques. However, advancing technology gradually rendered the original concept obsolete. The development of closed-circuit underwater breathing apparatus, scuba, and sophisticated delivery vehicles specifically designed for combat swimmers eventually superseded the Sleeping Beauty. By the early 1960s, the program had been formally discontinued, though its influence persisted in the design philosophy of subsequent special operations watercraft. Today, only 3 original Sleeping Beauties are known to survive. One resides in the collection of the Imperial War Museum in London, while another is preserved at the Royal Marines Museum in Portsmouth. The third remains in private hands, owned by a collector of specialized military equipment. Their rarity stems not just from the limited production run, but also from deliberate destruction of most units when the program was decommissioned, a final act of operational security for a weapon that had lived in the shadows. The Sleeping Beauty represents a unique chapter in naval special operations, a bridge between conventional canoes and sophisticated modern submersibles. Its legacy lives on in the approach of today's special forces, who continue to value simplicity, stealth, and operator skill over technological complexity. In military history's pantheon of specialized craft, the Sleeping Beauty occupies a position of quiet distinction. Much like its operational profile, it accomplished extraordinary missions without drawing attention to itself. A fitting epitaph for one of World War II's most ingenious and least celebrated weapons.